Hey everybody, this is Carl back again for another movie spoiler review. And as promised, now that we completed tons of Spider-Man related content, uh, I'm moving towards a lot of X-Men related content. And this Thursday I have uh, two comic book comic book reviews to put out. But as far as the movie, I'm reviewing the first X-Men movie. And yeah, directed by Bryan Singer. And man, this is one heck of a throwback. And man, what a walk down memory lane. Because, you know, when this movie came out, it honestly did gangbusters. Of course, you know, it was early 2000s, and for the exception of Blade, you'd be hard pressed to find any true to the source material comic book movies that people thoroughly enjoyed. It wasn't until maybe like a couple of years later when, or at least 3 years later, when the first Spider-Man movie came out with Sam Raimi, was a little bit more bright and colorful compared to this, because it was around that time when, you know, leather type costumes were a huge deal. But it really did gangbusters, and it really did start something. Now, of course, along the way, as we'll go through it eventually, there were some significant hiccups. But by and large, you gotta give credit where credit is due with the X-Men, or at least the first one, indefinitely, that really started the ball rolling for what we have right now with a lot of superhero movies. Because back then, they typically were box office duds, and nobody really supported the material, unlike today, or even 10 years ago. But yeah, but man, this brought us Hugh Jackman, because prior to this, we didn't know who Hugh Jackman was before he was casted as Wolverine. Which, fun fact, there was one, I think it was Tom Cruise that they wanted for the role of Wolverine, or somebody of notoriety, but you know, they had conflicting schedules, so they went with their second choice with Hugh Jackman, and he did gangbusters. And of course, Patrick Stewart was always like the ideal choice for Charles Xavier, because honestly, if you look through all the history of Professor X in comics, he is like a spot on Patrick Stewart lookalike. So it makes sense to cast Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier. But that being said, like I said, Patrick Stewart plays Charles Xavier, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, Ian McKellen as Eric Linkcher Magneto, Halle Berry as Aurora Monroe Storm, Femke Jensen as Dr. Jean Grey, James Marsden as Scott Summers Cyclops, Bruce Davison as Senator Robert Kelly, Rebecca Romaine as Mystique, Ray Park as Toad, Tyler Mane as Sabretooth, and I got Anna Paquin as Rogue, and Sean Ashmore as Iceman. And of course, the cast will eventually start growing as the movies press on. So I think it was like a brilliant idea, because if you know the way the movie begins, makes a heck of a lot of sense, especially given the way the X-Men were created by Stan Lee, it's supposed to have been representatives of what real life people who've been ostracized by society and being subjected to racism and prejudices. If you fit in any of these categories, or you're black, part of LGBT plus community, Hispanic, Native American, like anybody, real life, people who's a part of the community has been ostracized, by racism and bigotry and everything like that, or subjected. I said that's the word. Subjected to racism and bigotry of some facet, you can relate to the X-Men. And the way this movie begins is 1944 during World War II, Nazi Auschwitz. And Magneto, if you're not familiar, is a Jewish man who grew up, and of course, like, the inside joke with a lot of comic book readers is that, like, 1940s Nazi Germany, if he was like a teenager when that went on, Magneto should have been long dead by this point, as old as he is, and Xavier, as a matter of fact. I know comics, but I don't know. It's just like people always, will point that out. It's like, Magneto and Professor X would have been teenagers either around that time or very post WW2, when when the war was at its tail end, or when it's ended. They should have been in their teens, if not approaching their early 20s. Of course, he's 13, but it's just like, because, like, around puberty is when, like, mutants gain their powers. But it's just like, in the comics, he should be like in his 90s, if not approaching hundreds. And it's like, okay, he should have been long passed away at this point, unless part of that mutant ability is giving them longer lifespans. But anyway, and you forget, Magneto is a Jewish person. There's a lot of prominent Jewish characters in pop culture. You got Moon Knight, Shadowcat is Jewish, Ben Grimm from the Fantastic Four, he's Jewish. You got Magneto, Jewish. So there's a lot of very prominent Jewish characters in pop culture that you forget is Jewish. I just thought I want to point that out. And I would like that highlighted more. I want to say, like, they gotta be like super overt with their heritage. Like, they gotta be wearing yarmulkes all the time to point out they're Jewish. But there's a moment where in a Fantastic Four comic I was reading, with Ben Grimm stating that, every Hanukkah he sends, like, Hanukkah cards to Shadowcat and Moon Knight. And it's like, thank you. It's like, yes, like, they're all Jewish. They should be like, they know each other. They should be like, sending well wishes around the holidays like that. But anyway, they open it up with, during this horrific period in history, Eric Langcher in the Nazi camp, he is torn from his parents, as I'm assuming, I still never 100% sure if they were leading the parents to the gas chamber while they was tearing him away from them. And he's reaching out. They closed the gate, and he was trying to reach out to them. That's when his powers manifest, and he was, not in full control of it yet. He, was like just, trying to pull the gate open, uh, and he was eventually knocked out by the guards. So fast forward to present day, where you are introduced to Rogue, who her powers are starting to manifest as she was kissing this boy and absorbed some of his life force. And of course, Rogue has the ability that, even to this day, even though during like the House of X storyline, when things were getting like a new stable position, or at least a new status quo for the X-Men, I liked it. I'm going to reread that for the coming X-Men related comic book review, but they could have easily worked in where like somebody like Cyclops and Rogue, whose powers, if they're not covered up, they can be a danger to the people around them, but they chose to keep that instead of causing it to easily be fixed out, so that way they can just manage it at their will. But they decided to keep it. Don't know what the reason behind that was, but I guess I guess the writers want to keep it in like at least stay true to the character, because that's what everybody's used to them. With the glasses, got to keep that on and not just see Cyclops' eyes all the time. Just have him shoot out beams whenever he wants to. I don't know how I feel about that. I personally feel like, let Rogue control her powers, let Cyclops control his powers now. But anyway, she cannot touch people because she will absorb people's life force, and if there's a mutant, their abilities. Or if the normal person has some kind of skill set, like being a skilled athlete, she will temporarily take on that skill set herself. In the X-Men 90s TV show, if you want to know why in that and in the comics she's able to fly and have some amount of strength, of course, we never knew anything about Carol Danvers back in the day, but she was working for some bad people. Rogue ended up clashing with Captain Marvel at that time, called Warbird, touches her, but she held on a little bit too long, to the point where it put Warbird, Carol Danvers, in a coma temporarily, and she permanently kept her ability to fly and her feat of strength. And moving forward, that was always stuck, and that became her added asset. But here she doesn't have that. She just has her personal ability. And of course, people back then always, I think to this day, kind of comment about Anna Paquin's faux Southern accent. And of course, we all remember Rogue having that really deep Southern drawl, like, foghorn leghorn type of thing, like sweet tea covered in molasses under the willow tree type of Southern drawl. I'm currently going over the first season of 90s X-Men TV show, and like, wow, she is like leaning into that Southern drawl, like, making like, he is ornery as a bat and hound in the summertime. Kind of like, wow, that is like Southern. Okay. But anyway, she freaks out, not knowing what the heck is going on. Then you move towards DC, where Jean Grey is making a speech towards in this Senate area about mutant rights and being treated as equals and everything like that. Of course, they're not familiar that she has psychic abilities or anything like that. But then you get introduced to Robert Kelly, because in the comics he is well known to be part of those anti-mutant hate groups, and he mentions about all these different mutants with different abilities, and there's like, they need to be registered. and not that too dissimilar to the Superhuman Registration Act in the Civil War comic. This is the Mutant Registration Act, where mutants, if their powers manifest, they got to be immediately documented, so we'll know what they do. But of course, this to Magneto, who's watching it, in the shadows, along with Charles Xavier, who notices him, where it's like, as he states to Charles, he hears this mess all too similar. Nothing changes because if you know your history, Jewish people during the Nazi Holocaust got branded and everything like that, kind of coded like they're, not even people. And what he sees with the Mutant Registration Act is no dissimilar to what he was treated as. And it's like, man, you are really looking at straight up Dr. King and Malcolm X scenario, and that's what Stan Lee based Professor X and Magneto off of. Is very well known that because he was alive at that time, how and there's a line that Magneto says towards the end of the movie, by any means necessary, and it's like, that is that is straight up what Magneto believes wouldn't be that dissimilar to how Malcolm X would react. And while Dr. King, he wasn't a perfect human being, nobody is, he fought for the peace between black people and white people and all races together. And that's where it harkens to the mindset of these two iconic characters. But I love that line. I think everybody still quotes that line. It's like, why do you answer questions you already know the answers to? And Professor X is telling him, like, I'm looking for hope, and like, I will give you hope, and only ask for one thing in return: stay out of my way. And it's like, these two are like the best of friends, and it's like, is not that dissimilar to how like Tony Stark and Steve Rogers during the Civil War, where it's like, these two are the best of friends, but they just have such differences of opinions and differences of worldviews that they will butt heads. But in this case, this is like constant violence, at least up to a certain point in the past few years, when like the whole Krakoa House of X thing spurred on the new status quo. So then we see like Rogue hitch a ride with the truck driver, who is the voice of Beast in the 90s X-Men show. Didn't even realize this until like a few years ago, which was kind of, I spent all these years and did not even notice that. But she took off, trying to run away from her problems kind of situation, because she's the whole teenage angst kind of situation, doesn't know what she's gonna do or how she's gonna live her life kind of situation. She's in Alberta, Canada, where she stops up at this bar, and that's where we meet Hugh Jackman for the first time as Wolverine. And what an introduction! Is one of the best introductions in comic book movie history, where you just see like, just and this is before Hugh Jackman got really jacked, but he's still pretty buff, and he's just taking licks and just like placating to the crowd a little bit, trying to make it look good, because like, you don't want to just knock him out like right away, because he takes his licks, he feels it, but it doesn't mean nothing at the end of the day. Because like I said, people ask me all the time, if I had a superpower, what would it be? I would choose right away healing factor. that is probably the most useful superpower, in my opinion, of all, like out of all the superpowers, aside from maybe Superman's. That is the most useful superpower in my opinion, and I'll choose that any day of the week. Sure, I might get hurt. It's not like he has invulnerability. He still feel everything, and it's excruciating. Like you see, once we'll get to it, the Wolverine movie where he gets caught up in like a nuclear blast. He feels the burn and the radiation and all the other stuff. He feels that, and it's affecting him. But that healing factor, just like it takes minutes, sometimes seconds, but he will get up from that, and it's crazy how much he heals from. So then like the guy he ends up beating comes looking for his money because he feels like he got cheated. And he's like, I know what you are. It's like, you know, he's telling him to back off, but he just pressed on trying to attack him. And then of course you see it's probably like the best looking Wolverine's claws ever looked. It's kind of like Iron Man, Tony Stark's suit in the first Iron Man movie. Even though we got good stuff later on in other films, this movie is the best that Wolverine's claws ever looked. Even when it's protruding, and you get a closer shot as protruding out of his forearms. It's the same way how people feel about Tony Stark's Iron Man suit in the first film, that it still slightly looks better than anything we got in the next, you know, upcoming films. Rogue ends up sneaking a ride on Wolverine's vehicle. He you know, he has a soft heart, so he's like, he has her tag along, and there's like a nice little moment together. And they, you know, it's like just like when people, something, you know, touches my skin, like they just get hurt. And then she asks, like, which prior to this movie I don't think anybody really thought about, which I'm pretty sure people assume naturally. She asks, when they come out, do they hurt? He says, every time. And people prior to this movie would have assumed that, but it's never really like verbally specified, at least to my knowledge. It's never been like verbally specified in the comics, do they hurt? And it's like, well, duh, they gotta hurt. It's like, it seems like a stupid question, but it's just nice to get like kind of confirmation verbally. Say like, yeah, every time it comes out, it hurts every time. He just kind of, I won't say, you know, gone numb to it, but he just like, you know, got used to it to a certain degree. Or at least use it as like an added, you know, like gearing up for a fight, like get some, you know, a jump start. You know, he probably already gets like ticked off or anything like that, and but he just, that gives it the an added boost in his ferocity. Then all of a sudden they get into like a tree falls over, they get into an accident, Wolverine crashes through the windshield. Of course it affects him zero. I mean, it affects him, but he gets up. And I love the close-ups. Like I said, it's like Wolverine's powers is the best looking in this film than subsequent films that comes later, where you get this close-up shot of his forehead, this gash on his forehead, and you see the metal bone of his adamantium and all the muscle and like the blood and everything like that. And it's like how it slowly heals up. You see everything stitched together automatically. It's like, it looks so good. But people might disagree with me on this. I don't care. I don't care for this version of Sabretooth. He might look the part, but I think Liv Schreiber's interpretation of Sabretooth in X-Men Origins Wolverine I like better. Even though the movie isn't good, his depiction of Sabretooth, because here he doesn't speak much. it's just, you know, he speaks a little bit, but most of his dialogue is, you know, roars and growls. He just looks the part. While I think Liv Schreiber, being a great actor as he is, really brings out the antagonistic qualities of Sabretooth, and why him and Wolverine has always had this bitter animosity towards each other. And, you know, just to see these two claw it out at each other. And of course, here Wolverine doesn't remember him, because like Wolverine and Sabretooth has like a long, bitter, it goes in beyond rivalry, but just hate towards each other. Of course, technically it's fleshed out in X-Men Origins Wolverine, but Wolverine doesn't remember him because he eventually loses his memory after he, you know, sometime after he got his adamantium skeleton. But they've always had this, like, you know, every time they see each other, it's like try to kill each other on sight, even though neither one of them can die because they both have healing factors. But you know, Sabretooth is the flip side of the same coin of Wolverine, where Wolverine still maintains his soul. Sabretooth completely abandons it to the animal inside him. And that's what these two always butts heads. But here it's like you don't get much of that, where like you're kind of looking forward to it, and we never see Sabretooth show up ever again in the subsequent films, aside from X-Men Origins Wolverine, which is kind of a good bummer, because Sabretooth is an iconic comic book villain. They ultimately get saved by Cyclops and Storm, who bring them to the X-Mansion. Sorry, gotta get some water. So, while Jean Grey was trying to run medical attention on Wolverine, he comes to subdues her because he doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know the surroundings. So he tries to break out. He's getting drawn by this mysterious voice, and he's like discovers he's in the school. He bumps into Charles Xavier, and here you get to see what you guess is supposed to be like Jubilee with this girl in this yellow jacket. It's not even an iconic jacket like from the 90s show. It's just like a short blazer type yellow thing. And you get to see a little bit of excuse me, Shadowcat, because he passes through like the doorway. And it's like, wow, two very prominent X-Men members that not only get recasted in subsequent films, but never become part of the main cast of crew that you kind of hope they would be, especially Jubilee, who's been well known since the 90s TV show. Which, by the way, I'd like to speak on this now. Although everybody loves Rogue, a lot of people are in agreement that Rogue took the place of what should have been Jubilee's position. And I get the whole point of utilizing Rogue in this kind of thing, but you can still do it while maintaining. Here's the thing, like, you know, people back then didn't really believe in comic book movies because, like I said, they've been box office duds. Once the MCU's get the X-Men involved in a few years from now, they'll be a little bit more true and traditional to more than likely the 90s X-Men TV show, with getting like comic book accurate Rogue, or at least TV show accurate Rogue, where she's a little bit more of an adult. had a southern drawl, fly, strength, absorbing powers. Here he's not like that, and the people and the studios and the writers, directors had to do what they can and take what they get at that time, because even though it panned out well for them initially, they took a gamble and they had to do a lot of bargaining to get what they got going. But the subsequent films, they should have been able to like make the TV show as close to the TV show as possible. And that's my biggest issue with a lot of the Bryan Singer X-Men films. At least not everything was Bryan Singer, but the bulk of the X-Men stuff was him. And where it's like his goal should have been making sure we eventually acquire a lot of the characters that we all grew up on from the TV show, to make them like Gambit and Jubilee. And because she in here, Rogue has like a thing with Bobby Drake, Iceman, and it's like that didn't sit well with certain people, because like just like with Cyclops and Jean Grey and Peter Parker and Mary Jane and Superman and Lois, Rogue and Gambit, who's currently married right now, Rogue and Gambit had the most one of the most iconic. They're one of the most iconic couples in comics, and it's kind of like you could have had like a very young, rebellious Gambit, and just swap out Iceman for him. I'm not sure what the thinking was, and not thinking like Gambit will work in the story they was telling. Maybe that, obviously this is probably it, but you could have like included him at some point, or at least added him in the classrooms somewhere. I'm not sure, but it just seems like, okay, I can't begrudge this movie so harshly, even though there's stuff that I'm pretty sure everybody wished they would have gone with, but you understand they have to work with what they got at that time and took what they could get at that time to make what they have with the first movie. But thing is, moving forward, now they had the carte blanche and the trust between the fans and the studios, then they could have gone with the colored suits that you later get in First Class, because it's like the leather clothes and everything like that in the early 2000s. That was all the rage with superhero comics and movies. It's just like, okay, incorporate the colors. Wolverine's like, because Deadpool 3 will have Wolverine in his iconic suit, blue and yellow suit. But it's like you get like Cyclops in his 90s costume. Of course, you see that a little bit in like X-Men Apocalypse towards the end, where you see Cyclops in his kind of like iconic blue suit with the yellow thing, buckle thing in the visor. But it's just like you get that at the tail end instead of like the entirety of the film. It's like they're the most colorful. The X-Men are the most colorful cast in comics, one of the most. And it's like, I don't know. Studios were afraid to make it. We know what we're in for. Why would you be so afraid to actually like incorporate the iconic, colorful costumes? It's like, but like I said, to work with what they got at the time. X-Men had to walk so the MCU can run, essentially. Anyway, that's how to get that out the way. So and of course this is filled with a lot of cool memorable lines, because there's a lot of memorable lines throughout at least the bulk of the X-Men franchise. Like, what do they call you? Wheels. You know what happens when with a toad who gets struck by lightning? Same thing that happens to everything else. Yes, I know it's stupid, but it's kind of like, it's stupid, but you remember it. And you meet Storm, and like I love Halle Berry. Everybody loves Halle Berry. And I wouldn't have nobody opposed to the idea of casting Halle Berry as Storm, but she did not do a great job with that because Storm is from African descent and she speaks with an African dialect. And I'm not sure if they actually got Halle Berry some dialect coach to help her with the African accent, because eventually she, dumped all that in the future films. But it's just like, you could just not done it at all. If you didn't get like a good dialect coach for her, just don't do it at all, because it did not work with her. And of course, the stupid wig, I hate to say, looks dumb. Of course, they dumped all that in later films to just have Halle Berry's cool short hair just with some white highlights, and it works. It works. And it's like everybody like, okay, yeah, that works. It works. But her performance is still pretty good. Although she kind of feels like she kind of took a back seat for the most part, and that's the biggest problem with most of the Bryan Singer X-Men franchise from Fox franchise, is the fact that the X-Men is an ensemble team, and for the bulk of them, we are focused either on Wolverine, Professor X, or Magneto. Everybody's like, following them. And I feel like, I think everybody would agree that the first two X-Men stuff has to do with probably like Wolverine a bit. At least the first one, just maybe a slightly bit. Well, it's kind of like, establishing everybody. But the second one is very heavy on Wolverine. And I think, each, like, cause just like that's the benefit of a TV show where you can focus on different characters in the team. But if you was gonna make it like I'm pretty sure at the time we was just kind of focused on just 3 films. But then eventually, once First Class came about, and then like started really chucking them out, even though they got, aside from Days of Future Past, after that they started to go down in quality. You could have made sure that from First Class up into the last one, Dark Phoenix, they did Dark Phoenix the second time and it still made it worse somehow. You had, of course, Dark Phoenix is very Jean Grey centered story, but each movie should be like almost self-contained, but focus on a particular other member of the team. Like, one can be focused on Cyclops, the other Jean Grey, the other Nightcrawler, the other Beast, the other Rogue, the other Gambit, the other Jubilee, that kind of thing. If you want to make like at least a series of these things like they did, each one should have been like focused on one member and everybody else takes the back seat, or be supporting of them. That, I feel, is kind of like a downfall of the Fox X-Men related properties, that they too heavily focus on only 3 primary guys. 4 if you count Mystique, I guess. And well, 5 if you count like Jean Grey, because there's like 2 movies centered around Jean Grey, but they didn't really do a good job with that. But we'll get to it when we get to it. But even though I'm not looking forward to X-Men Dark Phoenix, I have not watched that one. I'm dreading it because I know how bad it is. Even from the trailers, I realized how bad it was. And it's like, I avoided that. But for the sake of the X-Men related reviews that I'm going to be doing for the subsequent weeks, at the tail end of it all, I'm going to have to review that as the last X-Men movie that I'm going to cover. Don't think I'll cover New Mutants, but I still didn't watch that one, and I knew that was going to be bad. I think that was released, even though New Mutants took forever to come out, and it kept getting pushed back, and then released sometime by the end of 2020, even though that year was kind of like a shit show a bit. But I had no faith or even need to even watch that. And while I'm speaking on that, don't know what's up with Disney Plus, because I went on trying to watch the first X-Men film. Luckily, I got like the DVD box set for the first 3 like many years ago. Here it is. Half of the X-Men stuff, at least more than half of the X-Men movies, aren't on Disney Plus for some weird reason. You know, you got Logan and Days of Future Past, for X3, X-Men Apocalypse, and Dark Phoenix. Everything else, they're not on Disney Plus for some weird reason. I don't know what, like, why. You got them all, put them there. Why are you leaving only some out? Oh God, it's so nerve-wracking with these streaming services lately. But anyway, we're going on major tangents here. But I love James Marsden Cyclops. I don't care what anybody says. And Cyclops and James Marsden, as a matter of fact, got the biggest shaft out of anybody from this franchise I ever seen. You think, like, you know, what happened to Henry Cavill with Superman was bad? James Marsden really got the shaft with like the X-Men stuff, because he was like you look at him, you cannot tell me that's not like a spot-on Cyclops brought to life. James Marsden's an incredible actor. And yeah, sure, you look at things like Hop and Sonic movies, you think like, oh, that's the bulk of his like acting chops. He done great work, and it's like he was great. It's like, you know, my first comic book X-Men related review that I'm going to be doing is a Cyclops centered story. I have to make him the first one, just to show that why he's like the reason he's the leader of the X-Men, and like how cool his powers is. And I think he got, like, you know, thrown on the bus because everybody praising Wolverine so hard. Wolverine's cool, yes. He's a great iconic character, yes. But it's like you lose the focus on why these two always butt heads, because Cyclops is the rule follower, Wolverine is the rule breaker. They constantly butt heads, and they fighting over this woman who clearly, you know, is going to end up with Cyclops at the end of it all, and they end up getting married and everything like that. Which, now I'm thinking about it, I should review in a comic book review of the wedding of Jean and Cyclops. But James Marsden, I'm glad in Days of Future Past we get to see him, even though it's a cameo. The fact that, you know, we haven't forgot about him. He got shafted, and we want to make sure that he gets the respect that he deserves. And James Marsden deserved respect, because like, I was like, oh my God, that is a spot on Cyclops. I loved it as soon as I saw it on the big screen. That was like great just to see Cyclops brought to life. And people don't give Cyclops the respect that he is due. Everybody just thinking, oh, he's such a stick in the mud. He's no different than Captain America, except Captain America is probably like a little bit more like inspirational, I guess. It has more of like a certain bit of like honor quality. I mean, they both got honor, but it's just like it's a little bit more so with Cap. But they have some similar qualities in terms of leadership and rules and stuff like that. It's just that Cyclops don't have that kind of inspirational speeches that makes him that endearing like we do with Cap. Although I argue back in the day, I don't think anybody really cared about Captain America prior to the MCU. He, like Iron Man, were relegated to like the B and C lister crowds before Kevin Feige got his hands on him. So like Cyclops uh, was a de facto kind of iconic leader back in the day in terms of leading a team. So I just want to bring that up. And of course, I'll bring it up again once I do my comic book review on him in a couple of days. But anyway, while Wolverine is getting introduced with everybody else, and he's getting promised by Professor X that, because he assumes that Magneto, who sent his goon Sabretooth after him, is something about Wolverine that he thinks Magneto wants. So he promises that he'll do everything he can to try to piece together his lost memories if he stays long enough for them to figure out. He'll help him figure out his memories if he stays long enough to figure out what Magneto wants with him. But at the same time, like, Rogue is just, this is weird. It's like you got Rogue, in like the enrolled in these classes at the X Mansion, and it's like, okay, you clearly know she's like a runaway. You don't bother to contact her parents to make sure that like they know she's okay, or at least make sure that they can get a hold of her and reach out to her and something like that. No, that's all completely it will work better if, because like most X-Men related or mutant related comics, there's mutants with stories where like their families or parents in general disown their kid because they're mutants and stuff like that. Sometimes they don't. But if you would have included like a scene where like that's why she's on a run because her parents kicked her out when they found out she was a mutant. All they know at that scene that we only seen is that something happened to the boy, and she was freaking out. After some investigation, they come to realize she's like a mutant after she touches more people and hurts them and stuff like that. That's when the parents kind of like disown her or cast her out and whatever like that. That kind of would have added to like why, okay, here she is a part of the X Mansion now, because she, like many of these students, were kicked out by their families. They could have added that just to make sure why, just to solve the reason why these people didn't bother to call her parents, because that's kind of standard procedure with runaways, I guess. Anyway, at the same time, Mystique and Toad kidnap Senator Kelly and bring him to Magneto, who is testing out this machine where it forces the mutation in normal people. And in Kelly's situation, while he was in prison, he ended up had some kind of like malleable body, kind of like rubbery or whatever, and he slips through the bars, and he's sitting there like hanging on the side of the cliff, which I didn't even know it was Genosha, the island of Genosha. In the comics, is where it's supposed to be like a safe haven for mutants back in the day, in like around the early 2000s, before it got like obliterated by Sentinels. But I didn't know. I thought it was just some normal island. I didn't know it's supposed to be Genosha. But Magneto mocks him. It's like, Senator, where would you go now you're one of us? Because that's what Magneto's plan is. And you later find out that he planned on using this on world leaders that's meeting on Ellis Island within days. So that way, because they're planning on passing this massive Mutant Registration Act, okay, we'll force them to recant all that, because now that they're going to be one of us, there's no reason for them to cast that, because they'll be one of us. And because it's kind of thing with people who don't understand the plight of people of minority groups, because like, oh, you're getting harassed by police and stuff like that. Oh, it's no big deal, blah blah blah, or whatever. You don't care about it because it's not affecting you. But if you're being put in a person of that ilk's shoes, then you'll be a little bit more empathetic and understanding. That is what Magneto's planning on doing. He's forcing these people to be in their shoes to get them to stop this mutant hate kind of stuff. Especially if they're world leaders, there's no way they'll have any, or at least his what he plans on is forcing them to like stop this hate mongering on his people. So Kelly ends up slipping away. Excuse me. Kelly's ended up slipping away. Oh, God. And he shows up on shore and runs to the Xavier Institute, knowing that Xavier is like well, it's assumed that he knows that Xavier is a mutant. I think you can assume that, but it's never been specified. All that you can know is that he's pro-mutant kind of situation. And meanwhile, in the middle of the night, Wolverine has like a nightmare about his past. Rogue is concerned about him, tries to like, wake him up. He freaks out, stabs her in the chest, which is kind of intense because like, even though it's like it's PG-13, it's no blood, but as you later see in like a kitchen scene in X2 where it's like should be a bunch of blood all over the freaking place, but she used her powers to absorb his healing ability to heal from her wounds, but it leaves Wolverine slightly catatonic, and she ends up running away because Mystique, disguised as Bobby Drake, forces her to run away because she's part of their overall plans. They use Cerebro to locate Rogue, who's at this train station. So Wolverine first goes, but then Cyclops and Storm soon go right after. And Logan comforts Rogue, saying that these people are good people. They really genuinely care about you, and the Xavier guy is the only one who knows probably what you're going through the most. So let's try to give them another shot. It's a nice little fatherly mentored type of role that Wolverine typically has. Usually it's with Jubilee, but sometimes Shadowcat, a lot of young type characters is kind of like psychic-ish to Wolverine sometimes in the comics. But then Magneto attacks, knocks out Wolverine, and kidnaps Rogue, who was the intended target, while Sabretooth and Toad deals with Storm and Cyclops. Now, I like this little moment in the train station where Cyclops is like, this little kid is looking at him, and he's just smiling, he just smiles back at the kid, and of course the parent comes swooping in. It's like, I told you not to talk to strangers, and it's like, I like that movie. I like that moment because it's kind of like really speaks to, if you ever been a black person or like a person of color who is just like on the street or walking down the street and somebody like somebody like white, you know, crosses the street or clutches their purse a little tighter because, oh, you're walking by them, that's kind of like that. Whereas kids kind of like just innocent, doesn't know anything about prejudice. He's just okay, just sees a guy with cool shades and he just smiles at him. He's an innocent kid. But you got these prejudiced, parents kind of like not realizing but instilling that bit of prejudices in that small kid that might end up growing up to recycle that bit of prejudice. Or if you ever gone to like a store and like people tend to like to follow you because they think you might steal something. It's almost exactly that. And it's just like like you see the look on Cyclops' face in that moment. I'm pretty sure every person of color made that same face when they're just trying to live like just standing there, you're not doing anything, but you just racism is just right in your face with that. And it's like, wow, it was just like especially nowadays, in the past few years when it's like racism is really running amok and you just like right in your face and it's like glaringly overt. Well, Xavier is trying to, because of the destruction, the police are converging. And of course, awesome display of Magneto's powers where he just lifting up cars and crashing them down on top of other cars and stuff like that. And yanking all these officers' guns and turning around on them. And just hearing like all these guns just cocking at the same time. It's like, shows like the level of deadliness that is Magneto. But then Professor X take mind controls Sabretooth and Toad, and he tries to get Magneto to stand down, but Magneto says like, well, you're going to have to either kill me or I will or let me go, because if you don't, I will slaughter all these people right here and now. So not wanting to like cause massive slaughter, he releases everybody and they get away with Rogue. Now they come to realize their true intended target was Rogue, and they try to figure out why. Kelly shows up, and thanks to Professor X getting inside his head, he realizes that Magneto created this machine that he can powers up with his powers that generates the field that causes forced mutation on normal people that affected Kelly. And Kelly, because he's not a natural genetic mutant, his body is rejecting it, and it caused him to turn to water and die. So that's Magneto not realizing what his machine can do. They gotta stop him, otherwise he would probably cause millions of deaths of a lot of normal people in New York. So they all suited up, even though they made this line like, oh, you really go out in this? What do you expect? Yellow spandex? Yes, that's what we expect. Anyway, they take the Blackbird and fly to near Ellis Island, and realizing the plan, Magneto's plan is having Rogue take giving his power to Rogue so she can power the machine, because it nearly weakened Magneto when he tested it out on Kelly, using it on on the world leaders near Ellis Island. That would end up killing him. So in lieu of sacrificing himself for his goal, he forces somebody else to do it himself, do it themselves. So uh Toad and Mystique take on the group as they're trying to work their way up to the Statue of Liberty. And of course, it's cool-ish fights, but then again, somebody like Storm and Jean Grey and Cyclops should be easily able to handle somebody like Toad. Even though Toad, yeah, is Ray Park. I get it. He's good at stunts and some martial arts and stuff like that. We've seen him as Darth Maul in Phantom Menace, but it's like, this is Toad. And of course, what we see like Storm does to him by the end of this long drawn out scene, it's like you should have done that from the jump. I mean, it's like you got the power of the weather. You're an Omega level mutant. You can just make a mini whirlwind and toss his ass into the wall. Done. Or Jean Grey can reach inside his mind and lobotomize him, or at least put him to sleep immediately. Done. Cyclops can blast him, not maybe at full force, but enough force to blast him across the room into a bunch of crap and knock him out. Done. Toad, yeah, he has powers, but it's like, well, these three who's been trained, he should be nothing. He should be nothing to him. But Mystique, maybe a little bit more of a trickier opponent for somebody like Wolverine. But first of all, how is she able, because Mystique can make herself look like people, but she cannot copy people's abilities. She has always been like something under my skin when I first saw this movie years ago. It's like, she should not be able to copy his claws. That is the thing that always stuck with me. And it's like, and of course, sure, it's like fake, because Wolverine is able to claw right through him, but it's like, is that part of her skin? Or like, she shouldn't even be able to make those. But Wolverine's, yeah, sure, she got like maybe martial arts moves, sure, but he shouldn't be able to be like knocked out so easily by someone like Mystique. And of course, this is before the First Class situation and Mystique. I'll get the First Class, but I was going to bring up now, it's like, because the First Class was kind of like a soft reboot moving forward for X-Men properties, but it's like, you're supposed to know Mystique since she was a child, and here you just clearly don't recognize her anymore. Of course, you can argue that Mystique and Professor X haven't had well, in this movie they haven't had like a face-to-face interaction, so you could probably get away with it. But X2, well, no, they wasn't even meeting each other in X2. Matter of fact, or in X3, yeah, the first three X-Men movies, Professor X and Mystique never had like a actual scene together. So you could get away with them knowing each other since childhood, even though that's not comic canon. But Mystique helped form the X-Men according to the First Class soft reboot stuff. She helped form the X-Men, and she knows Jean Grey and Cyclops. But I digress. It's just, like I said, it's a soft reboot, so it doesn't really matter. But eventually Wolverine managed to sniff her out, neutralize her with claws in her stomach. Somehow she makes it through. So they make their way up. They get captured by Magneto while Sabretooth is watching them as he's trying to get this machine powered up. Wolverine stabs himself to break through the metal restraints. Fights Sabretooth. You get like also fight on top of the Liberty, Statue of Liberty, and thanks to awesome teamwork between Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Wolverine, where he's like, he managed to snatch off the visor that they stole from Cyclops and have Jean telekinetically draw it in front of Cyclops' face and tell her, I need you to trust me. When I say open your eyes, you open them. And like, she managed to like put it in front of his face. He opened his eyes. She diverts the beam's pathway towards away from her face to the left, hitting directly into Sabretooth, knocking him off the building. I was like, that is impressive teamwork right there. It just shows like teamwork without even trying to like having to speak towards each other what they're exactly going to do. It's just like, when I tell you to do something, I want you to trust me. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna trust you. And just, he opened his eyes. She just like, you know, instinctively diverts it to the beam. And it's like awesome display of teamwork in an ensemble cast. They also show great teamwork where it's like, you know, using the wind storm, you know, carries him into Wolverine into the air while Jean steadies him with her psychic abilities, carries him on top of the machine to destroy it, and Cyclops blasts Magneto to keep him from neutralizing Wolverine. Rogue is seemingly dead, but she managed to wake up while Wolverine is holding her and takes on his healing ability again to heal from her you know, I won't say wounds, but like the effects from the machine. Of course, you want to know what happened to, like, you know, Professor X. Mystique sabotages Cerebro to keep him from locating Rogue, but not counting Jean Grey being powerful enough to use Cerebro to locate where Rogue is on Liberty Island. But Professor X managed to get out of the comatose state. Then the movie ends with Professor X telling Wolverine that from the information he managed to gather from you know, his leads he can find at Alkali Lake, where in the comics that's where Wolverine got his metal claws. So we'll get to X2. If not next week, the week after. We'll play by ear because there's some stuff I gotta take care of next week. But you get like Rogue's iconic white hair because of the whole machine thing. You know, that's how you get her iconic white streak. Don't know why you can't just have that, but whatever. And then she gets starting a relationship with Bobby Drake, which seems so wrong. And so Wolverine goes off to find some answers about his past. And stealing Cyclops' bike, just another F you to him, which is kind of funny. And of course, you know, Cyclops and the others look on the news and see Mystique survive and taking on the persona of Senator Kelly. Even though her eyes glowed long enough for people should have picked up on that, which is weird. So she assumed the identity of Kelly, you know, carried on all through into the sequel. But yeah, and then the movie ends, of course, with like Magneto and Professor X having this chess match in this plastic prison, which is very creative. You know, how else you gonna hold somebody that controls metal, which is almost everywhere? You put them in a plastic prison, as far away from metal as possible. And of course, you get that line. It's like, you know, there is a war coming, Charles, and I intend to fight it, and I'll always be there to stop you. old friend. And you get the cool little theme from the X-Men franchise. In a nice way to end a film. And yeah, man, it really holds up. I mean, it's like I said before, this movie walks so like the MCU can run, because it really set the tone for a lot of films like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, even like the Fantastic Four films. It just it really set, you know, like the ball, it really got the ball rolling. Sure, it has its pitfalls, but you cannot argue the road it paved for a lot of iconic films that we have today. So I will always give it its just due, you know, through its faults and all. But let me know what you guys think of the 2000 X-Men films. What was your favorite moments? What is stuff that you didn't care for? Favorite character in the cast? And yeah, I will see you guys in a couple of days for some X-Men comic book related reviews. So yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Take care. Have a great night.